Hey everyone, and welcome to my review for the 2021 4K Apple TV. Now this particular unit, the one that I'm holding, isn't actually the 2021 model. For those of you who follow the community tab for my channel, you will already know that I've already sent back my 2021 model, and I will get into that a little later on. But what I wanted to do with this video was initially start with a conclusion. So I don't want to keep everybody waiting. And what I want to do is give you my conclusion from my week or so of testing with the new 2021 4K Apple TV. Then I'll go into more depth a little later on. So the conclusion is this: if you don't currently have a 4K Apple TV and you're looking for a media streaming device, if you have NAS storage with movies, anything like that, or if you just want a really polished product, then go out now and buy the 2021 4K Apple TV. But for those of you who already have the existing one, as I do, and I actually have two of these, one for each room, I don't think you should upgrade, and the reasons I'll get into shortly. But first, what I wanted to do was just concentrate on the positives, anything that I noted from my week and a half of testing with it, and things that are actually improved. So the first thing is the setup experience, and just the whole experience of using the 4K Apple TV is really polished. So it literally took me less than 2 minutes. I did make a sort of video. It was a little disjointed. What I may do is just overlay that on this video. The setup was literally a case of plugging it in. Because I'd already had my previous one set up in that same location, I could literally just swap over my cables. And then at that point, I literally turned it on. I got the prompt on my phone asking me if I wanted to just set it up, hit OK, and it basically just did everything for you. I was a little impatient where as soon as it got to the home screen, I started clicking on apps. But if you do give it a few seconds, it will automatically log you into everything as well. So that's really good. The setup process, I know for some people, I've seen, I think it was Taylosive Tech, he did mention how the automated software setup where you use your mobile phone, it didn't actually work for him. So even though it gave him the prompt and he followed it through, by the time he got to the end of it, it basically just said setup failed, and then he had to do it manually. But for me personally, I don't know whether this is a network issue or something like that, but for me personally, I've never had any issues like that. And the new one worked perfectly first time. Okay, so the next positive, and this is something that was confirmed by HD TV test, and that is that the raised black issue appears to be fixed on the new one. Now for me personally, it wasn't really too much of an issue. For those of you who aren't aware, I'll just give you a little context, a little background. So whenever you viewing Dolby Vision content on this Apple TV, you would basically get raised black. So rather than being pure pitch black, as I have an OLED TV behind me, rather than the blacks being pure black, they would appear slightly grey. Now there was a very simple fix, and that was to basically drop your contrast down from 50, which is the default for most picture profiles, down to 49, and that would basically fix it. Initially when you do it, it does look a little extreme because it does obviously crush some of the blacks or the greys, but for me personally, it's never been that big of an issue. So I literally did it when I first noticed and read up about it, and that was the sort of fix, if you like. And since that point, I've literally just left my settings, so I've probably more adapted to those settings now. So it's whenever I'm watching a movie or something, I'm not really thinking that, yeah, all the greys and all the blacks look really crushed, because it's giving me those inky blacks. But for those of you out there that are a little bit more particular on those kind of things, and especially if you've got a calibrated display, because once you calibrate it, not with the Apple TV calibration, I mean an actual calibration, then you will probably want those settings to be raised in order to actually hit accurate markings for each color as well as your white point. So for those of you out there that were concerned about the raised black issue, that has been fixed. Okay, so coming on to the sort of negatives and the reasons why I actually returned mine. So initially, I believe this one has like a A10X and the new one has a A12 possibly CPU in it. I'll confirm that on screen somewhere. I've not actually got the figures and the stats in front of me, but either way, I didn't actually notice any difference between the two. Now, bearing in mind that obviously I'm paying, I did have a voucher, so it was only actually costing me something like 50 odd quid. But even still, essentially it's costing me £190 because I always go for the 64 gig model. And that sort of price difference for virtually no difference in terms of performance, I didn't think was worth it. That's one of the reasons why I actually returned the new one. In terms of performance, the old one, even to this day, is still perfect in terms of speed, in terms of reliability, for the simple reason that tvOS is so simple and so basic in terms of how it's laid out, how we're all so used to using tvOS. And especially for me, because I've tested through the betas before tvOS 14 even came out, it meant that I was just so comfortable with it. Yeah, occasionally you might get a little bit of lag here and there. You might have the odd stutter when an app is closing down when you've hit home or menu, but it's never been to the extent where anything's a problem. So I never felt the need. Probably more accurately, I didn't actually feel any improvement from the new one. So that was the first thing. Right, the second reason, and this was the main reason, if you go back to my unboxing video, why I actually upgraded in the first place, and that was to do with the footage that's actually captured using the iPhone 12, so the Dolby Vision footage. So the reason that has never played back, I did a little bit of reading. I didn't look too much into it because at the end of the day, the sort of technical jargon side of things doesn't really matter for the normal consumer. But essentially the reason it doesn't work is because the iPhone Dolby Vision footage is based upon HLG. Now that in itself is not that strange, but apparently the container that's used when that dynamic metadata is then placed on top of a static metadata, which is HLG. HLG is just a fixed sort of parameter sort of HDR format, whereas Dolby Vision is dynamic, so it will change scene to scene. And apparently when those two are mixed together, the version of that sort of amalgamation, if you like, it means that nothing currently supports it. No current app actually supports it, and that's why it never plays back on the Apple TV. Now, the reason I bought the new one was I was hoping that that would have been fixed in the new one. It would have supported that format, and I could have played back all the footage that I've captured over the past 12 months and any future footage that I'm going to capture when I upgrade to the new one, and so on and so forth. But it's not. So you still can't play back any Dolby Vision footage captured by any of the iPhone 12 series. So that was a bit of a letdown. I have reached out to Infuse, which is the app that I mainly use for all my media, and they have confirmed that it is something that they're working on. However, having learned this the hard way, I will always say to anybody watching my videos, never buy a product, especially a tech product, based upon any future improvement promises. So whilst Infuse have pretty much said that, yeah, that is something that they probably will be able to make work, and they were also less than forthright in confirming whether that would actually come to the older Apple TVs or whether it will be something that they actually reserve for the newer model. That is something that, if that comes about, so if they do manage to get that working, I would then consider upgrading at that point. But at this point in time, it's not working. So there's no point in me having it for that one particular reason right now. As I say, if they get it working and everything's sorted in the future, then I may come back to it. Obviously, you can always go back and buy it again. Okay, so now coming on to the most controversial one, and that is something that everybody else was happy about and something that I absolutely hated, and that was the remote. For those of you who follow my channel, you'll know that I basically use these cases for any of the 4K Apple TVs that I have. So the white one is for the other room and the black one is for this room, matching the aesthetic of everything behind me, with all the other remotes basically being in a similar sort of either black color or black casing. Now, because I use this case, what actually happens is you have an edge all around the touch surface, and because of that you can literally rest your finger on each edge and click forward and backwards, and it does all the functions perfectly. I also figured out very early on that the YouTube app in particular doesn't like being stored in cache, or in memory, and for that reason, if you kill the app and come back to it, any swiping issues that you might have are normally fixed. Now, I can't remember whether I actually changed the sensitivity speed. I think I may have done, so that might be another reason. But basically over the last, I think this was the first one I actually bought, and I think I've had this one since since they first came out, since the 4K, the original 4K Apple TV came out. But since that came out, I've never once had an issue with that particular remote. Now the new one is pretty much a mixture of these two. So this is the original Apple TV remote, and I absolutely hated this remote. And the main reason for that is, if I just be quiet for a second. So this is a normal button click. So as you can see, you get a little bit of tactile feedback. Now this is the button click on up. So as you can see, it's completely dampened down. And the reason for that is these buttons would always fail. These remotes would always fail. I had, I think between myself, friends and family members, maybe about 6 or 7 different Apple TVs that used this particular remote. And every single one of them failed in some form or another. So one of those buttons, be it the menu button, the play pause button, or one of the sort of circular buttons, the directional pads, one of them would always fail. Now it wasn't the end of the world because these were relatively cheap and you could just buy third-party ones. And I did actually have a few third-party ones laying about. For me personally, and having used the newer one, and especially with the placement of where they put the sort of mute button, so they switched around the play pause and the mute. So obviously on this current one you have the Siri button just there. They moved that to the side, which is fair enough, but rather than just replacing the Siri button with the mute button, they switched these two buttons around. So for anybody like me who's been using the Apple TV for quite a few years now, this version of the Apple TV remote, every single time I would click play pause, it would then mute it rather than pausing it. And initially, I know eventually you would get used to that. Muscle memory would take over and you'd basically get used to it. But for me initially, I hated that. The other thing about it is obviously this is something that will also get fixed down the line, but as with this one, it's bare aluminium. And the thing about bare aluminium is I can't hold bare aluminium for very long without it causing me to get really dry hands and to get rash all over my hands. I'm not sure what it is. It happens with almost all metals. I can't wear rings, I can't wear bracelets or anything like that. I'm really sensitive to touching metal basically. And with that new one, because it is so new, there is no sort of case like this that I can buy and just cover it with. So for that reason, the remote was not something that I actually like. And whereas other people are actually going out and buying the remote for their current ones, I would do everything possible to actually avoid that remote. Obviously, if I did upgrade and I did buy it, I'd probably eventually stick with it. And like I say, muscle memory would take over and you'd get used to the button placement and everything like that. But no, I didn't like it. The other thing about it was the other main thing that it came with was the power button in the top right. Now, that's kind of unintuitive as well. So what you have to actually do, nobody really mentioned this properly during the keynote or anything like that. You have to actually hold it for about 2 or 3 seconds. If you just press it, you get a prompt on screen saying hold the power button in order to turn it off. So you have to actually hold it for say 3 seconds. Now between that and the current system where if I hold the TV button, it'll bring up the sleep, it'll bring up the control center if you like, and it's already hovering on sleep. So yeah, there's one extra step, but between that and basically what I have on my current one, there's virtually no difference. It does it in exactly the same amount of time. Now the only difference would be the Apple TV that I've got connected to the TV in the opposite room, in the other room, so the one that actually works off this remote, that is connected to a TCL TV, and for some reason that TV only ever turns off when you do that the first time you actually connect the Apple TV. So if I reset the TV, connect the Apple TV up to it for the first time, it will then actually reset like you turn off the TV as you would expect it. But then the first time you turn it back on, it never does it after that point. It does work with my Fire TV stick or any other remote that I've got hooked up to it, but it just doesn't work with the Apple TV remote. Like I say, it's a bug with that particular TV as opposed to being an issue with the Apple TV, because it works perfectly fine in this room, and that was both connected directly to my LG OLED TV as well as connected to my soundbar, which is where I normally have it connected. Okay, so the next thing that I didn't really like about that particular remote, and that was the scroll function. So obviously, because it's in a mixture between these two remotes, you have the features of a touch sensitive area, but you have it in a sort of scroll pad. At the moment, a lot of of apps are actually not set up fully for it. So reaching out to Infuse once again, they did confirm that that is something that isn't currently set up in the best way, but that's something that even in the apps where it does work, such as YouTube and a couple other apps that I tested, it doesn't work in the way that you think it does. So most people think that if you want to scroll, you pause it and then you basically just scrub forward like this, and it will keep going forward, and if you scrub backwards like that, it will keep going backwards. But what actually happens is from this point to this point, it will go forward, and then as soon as you go past that point and you come back down to here, it'll actually go back to where you were. And the reason for that is you're not meant to actually pause it. So it's not actually that intuitive. What you're meant to do is touch on in the apps where it actually works, because it doesn't work in all the apps yet. You're meant to actually touch on the circle, wait for a little icon to change on the status bar where you have your timings. And then once that pops up, at that point you then scroll forward and it'll keep scrubbing. But in order for that to come up, sometimes you have to wait maybe 3, 4, 5 seconds, and sometimes it doesn't even come up. So you end up doing that and it's not actually doing anything. So between a mixture of it simply not having the software updated, all the apps updated in order to support it correctly, and possibly a broken sort of system in the sense that the delay is too great for it to actually be intuitive. Most people would just end up trying to use forward and back, skipping it forward 10 seconds and backwards, which is normally what I prefer to do. If I'm going to scrub through content, generally I don't want to scroll through really slowly. I want to actually skip forward 5, 10, 15 seconds, whatever the preset is. That function wasn't actually working in most apps. I believe that has now been fixed in Infuse, but there are some other apps where I did test it, where if you just click the forward button or the back button, it would basically do nothing. And that for me just made it really a really bad experience. Now, as I say, do take that with a pinch of salt, because at the moment a lot of apps aren't updated, and once they are updated the experience will be better. But that is why I say right now don't upgrade to it. Now, coming on to another one of the features that was actually included in the new 4K Apple TV, and that is Thread. So Thread is something that I've not really spoken too much about on my channel, despite me doing a lot of videos HomeKit related. And the main reason for that, and something that obviously probably would have experienced once I got the new one in, is Thread only really works with other Thread devices. So it's not like you can bring in that new 4K Apple TV and all of a sudden your existing system will get better. So if I show you my iPhone, I know it's going to be kind of weird looking because of my ND filter, but as you can see, I have a lot of HomeKit devices. Bulbs, door sensors, window sensors, light switches, all sorts of different things, cameras, everything shows up in there. Now what happens is any devices that work off Thread essentially will communicate through your hub and basically give you a better connection. They will also save your home network a little, because they won't actually communicate over Wi-Fi, and instead they will work over this new system Thread. Now, any of the existing devices that I have, which is quite a lot, I probably have around between say 70 and 90 different devices connected to my HomeKit at the moment, my HomeKit setup, and none of those are Thread compatible. So that means it doesn't actually help me with any product that I currently have set up, and I'm not in the process of going out and buying every new product out there in order to get Thread. It's just simply not worth it. Most of my products currently actually work off Zigbee. They'll either go through an Aqara system or something similar. So very few devices are actually connected directly to my network at the moment anyway, and whether it's Zigbee or something else, it pretty much does the same thing. So for me personally, Thread doesn't actually give me any improvement, and even when I did a quick search, literally the only product that I could actually find that's available to me in the UK is probably things like sprinklers and outside wall outlets and things like that, which I don't really need. So yeah, that's something that may help people further down the line, and any new products you'd hope that they are including in it, so then it just makes your whole system better. But currently it serves no purpose to me and doesn't actually give me any advantages of having that. Okay, so now coming on to a few side notes, and the first one of those is the fact that despite the fact that it's not much of a bump, so in terms of performance, until tvOS 15 comes out, which may change things, right now they perform exactly the same, apart from a few caveats, and that is the things that Apple actually highlighted in their keynote, which is live TV, where they're using high frame rate HDR, which I don't make use of, so that is of no use to me. And obviously Thread and a couple of other things that actually come into it, where the newer chip actually benefits you. Very few other things do actually benefit me in terms of the newer one, so there isn't that much of a performance increase. But having said that, I still don't think we're going to be seeing another one for maybe 2 to 3 years. Even this one, this Apple TV, it wasn't actually released for quite a while after the sort of upgraded Apple TV with this remote. So I believe they released a HD version with this remote initially. I was actually tempted to buy it, but then I wanted to wait out for the 4K version just to future-proof it, and then eventually they released this. Now, it's been around maybe 2 to 3 years, possibly even longer, since this Apple TV actually came out. So for that reason, I don't think there is another Apple TV just sat there waiting to come out. I think that this is it. So I think we won't actually see another one for maybe 2 to 3 years. So for that reason, even if you don't buy it right now, thinking that something else is around the corner, I don't think anything is coming, because it just doesn't make sense for them to release this one and then release another one straight away when they can actually get quite a lot of revenue out of it. Just the new remote alone will sell a lot of those Apple TVs. So for that reason, I don't think another one is coming. The second sort of side note is the fact that none of the apps are really taking advantage of any of the power, if there is any power increase, because the A10X as well as the A12 chips, they're pretty much on par. The A10X, I believe, on graphical performance, I think it may have actually even been better, because it was the iPad chip. But between the two, right now, there's just currently nothing set up that is actually working and taking advantage of it. So there wouldn't be any advantage to you actually going and upgrading straight away. You may as well just wait and see how things pan out. Once tvOS 15 comes out, who knows, it might improve quite a bit. But like I say, wait for that, because right now there's nothing pushing you to actually go out and rush and buy it. Okay, so the next thing is HDMI 2.1. So obviously we do get a HDMI 2.1 rather than the 2.0B, I believe it is on this existing one. Now for me personally, that doesn't actually make any difference, because I'm going straight into a soundbar, and the only real benefit for HDMI 2.1 for a device like this would be anything making use of 4K 120, which currently I don't believe I make use of any apps that require that. I have tried out Apple Arcade again since getting that new one, and to be honest, I still pretty much stand where I was initially, which is it's too childish. There's nothing in there that has the performance or any real sort of games that would pull me in and say that, yeah, that Apple Arcade is suited for anybody other than young children. Talking about Apple Arcade, it brings me on to another point of that new remote, and that was the fact that they actually got rid of the gyroscopes. So unlike these remotes where you can actually use them for playing Crossy Road or anything like that, where, you know, maybe not Crossy Road, but more so the sort of tennis games and anything where you can actually wave it around and actually make actions using your motion, none of that works with that new remote. So that's something that they actually got rid of. But yeah, 4K 120 doesn't really benefit me currently. Who knows further down the line? As I say, wait for tvOS 15. Maybe they bring something out that actually makes use of that. Maybe they change the interface and they make it 120 hertz for much smoother home screen, or just change things up as an ice cream van comes. But currently, I don't see any real improvements to that. Okay, and the final sort of side note is everything that you can do on the new remote, you can do on the old one. So unless you're one of those people that really had a problem with the old remote, that side of things doesn't really create much of an incentive for me to actually update. Yes, as I say, it's got the dedicated power button, but for me personally in this room, that's not even a concern, because when I use the sleep button, it puts everything to sleep anyway. Okay, another little side note on that remote, and one thing that I wasn't really too fussed about. So a lot of people did comment that they should have put the U1 chip into the new remotes to make it easier for you to find. Now, I'm not sure what you guys are doing out there in terms of your rooms at home. For me personally, just down here, just down there, I keep all my remotes there, and same thing in the other room. I've got a place where all my remotes go. So unless you're literally throwing your remotes around the room, or your kids are literally using them as batons or something, I don't understand how people lose remotes. Like, I have literally never lost one of my remotes. So having U1 in it doesn't really have any advantage to me. The other thing is, as you can see, obviously I use covers on my remotes to make them more ergonomic, as well as giving you more grip. Now, that is not going to get hidden anywhere. You can spot this from a mile away. Similarly with this particular room, I got away with using black because I know that exactly where I put this every single time I turn the TV off, and when the TV is on, I have the remote with me. So that's never really been a concern for me. I can understand why people would want it, because if you've got rid of something like the gyroscopes, then really they should have given something back. And as well as that, obviously U1 is the big thing for Apple, and it is what separates their product from a lot of competitors. So having that in the remote probably would have given an extra feature, but this is Apple we're talking about, so they're not going to give you anything for free. So it's not something that I'm that concerned about, but I kind of get where people are coming from. Okay, so that brings us back to my conclusion, which is, once again, the new 2021 4K Apple TV is probably, for me personally, it is the best streaming box and media sort of device on the market, being in the iOS ecosystem. But I wouldn't recommend anybody with a current one to actually go out and upgrade. The only sort of exceptions to that would be for the people that maybe want to move their existing one into a second room. I currently already have two, so this would have ended up in my bedroom, where it probably would have got used maybe once a month if it's lucky. So it's a case of literally just putting it to the side. Obviously you could always go down the route of selling it, but there won't be many people that will be wanting to buy this current one, given that the new ones come out, and obviously for most people out there, the remote improvements would mean that it's a better deal. Yeah, that's it. Possibly further down the line, once the apps catch up, once tvOS 15 comes out, and who knows what that brings. I will have a video on tvOS 15 coming up, by the way, so if you haven't already done so, subscribe and hit the bell icon for that. But this was my thoughts. I don't expect everybody to agree with what I've said. As I say, these are all very subjective sort of opinions. Objectively, as I say, that's where the conclusion comes in. Objectively, the new one is obviously better. Objectively, the new remote for most people is obviously better. But subjectively, this does the same thing for me, so there's no reason for me to upgrade from it, and I prefer this remote for now anyway, until I replace all my units with the new one and I get used to those button placements and the ergonomics of that. And just on the ergonomics, by the way, I do actually prefer the size of that remote, but as I commented in the unboxing video, I think there was way too much wasted space, and from the actual breakdown videos that iFixit have done, it actually shows that there is a lot of dead space on that remote, and the battery portion is literally only in the very bottom section. So whilst I kind of get, and I do actually like the fact that it was slightly longer, slightly wider, slightly easier to hold when it's not in a case, When you've got something like this where you've actually got a case and you've got ergonomic bumps and it's raised in the center part, which makes it really easy to pick up, this is actually a much easier remote for me to handle and pick up and just maneuver than the new one is. So given that, obviously there are both pros and cons to that. So subjectively for me right now, the new one doesn't make sense, and hence why I actually sent it back. I did send it, rang up Apple, did the return. It was collected by UPS, who actually came late despite having a 4-hour booking slot. And they have today actually sent me a gift card which isn't working. So yeah, overall this whole experience hasn't been the best. It's been a bit of a disappointment, but hopefully I'll get that sorted. Hopefully tvOS 15 will bring some improvements that will actually justify that new one a little bit more. But until then, I'm sticking with my current one. Anyway, that's it for this video. As I did mention, I will have other videos coming, so if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to the channel. Also hit the bell icon, that way you're notified whenever I upload a new video, and I'd really appreciate it as well if you give this video a thumbs up. Other than that, thanks very much for watching.